A hobby. Sometimes it's just a hobby that you have that can develop into a way to talk to people about critical thinking. Martin Gardner. Martin Gardner was a journalist who had a hobby, mathematics, and was able to talk about mathematical puzzles, and that led him into a lot of other areas. And although he wasn't formally a mathematician in a university, he was able to use that to communicate with people. Think about your hobbies, think about your experiences, think about your education, how it can help out. A profession. You may remember this guy. Okay. We don't know what Randy's doing with the matchbox right there, but I'm sure it's very entertaining. Randy's a professional magician who was able to use that. And Randy's actually been a professional magician in many capacities. There he is. That's him actually with Alice Cooper when he's actually about to, I don't know, saw off the head. That crazy-looking guy back there isn't actually Randy. Managed to find the photo of that. And there's Randy in Afghanistan certifying election results. It is kind of weird, when you realize that the other people you see who look like him usually have turbans on their head and large, homicidal followers. No, this guy's probably a pretty good guy, so I don't mean to disparage him. Sylvia Brown said, "What?" Okay. There he is. There he is at NASA because they needed him there. So his expertise has allowed him to go into a lot of other areas. He talks to scientists. He goes into laboratories, and he says, "Hey, you may know moon rocks, but watch me do this magic trick." No, but he can talk about deception. He can talk about how scientists fool themselves. And you may remember the gorilla in the basketball game. We have a geologist, I think, in the background here. Is that you, Slick? Yeah, it's Slick over there. I think you arranged that tour for him, didn't you? Yeah, cool. Interest. Sometimes it's just an interest, or something maybe not necessarily a hobby, but something you're active in that you can lead to getting involved in this. Jerry Andrews. If you haven't had a chance to see Jerry Andrews' puzzles, go see Jerry Andrews. And Jerry's doing something impossible with his arm. Jerry has gone from being a magician who's been interested in optical illusions to creating his own, to having his stuff used in museums around the world. Now, Jerry didn't set out and said, "Hey, I'm going to put these things in museums." He explored them for himself. He shared them with other people, and he created some really powerful stuff. I use his trisomal space warper when I go to classrooms. I set that down. That's the disc you stare at, and Jerry's got a big version of it. Please, go look at it. I bring it in the classroom. I spin it. I have kids look at it. They look up, and their faces start to melt and go apart. And it's a great example of how our brains can be fooled, because we all like to think, our brains are these sort of perfect things. I'm not going to make any mistakes. Well, why is your face melting? It's a lot safer than other ways kids get that experience. Quickly, we'll go through 5 rules for better communication. And this is sort of trial and error. When I first went into schools when I was 15, I'd be invited as a magician to go talk about perception. And first I'd just go do a magic show. And that was fun. And I realized, okay, they watched my magic show, but did they think any differently about how these things worked? And so I began to tweak my message and try and develop it a little bit more so I could maybe communicate something more than just, "Hey, look, it's a bird." Wonder. Wonder is a great thing. I do my bowling ball trick. I go out there, make something appear. It doesn't have to just be that. Margaret talked about having a wizard hand out flyers for stuff. That's great. I have Wizard School's my video, and I'm doing more of those, and I'm using that to talk to kids. Kids love magic. And when a kid thinks of magic, it's different when a grown-up thinks of magic. Grown-ups like magic to be magic, snap your fingers, it's there. If you tell a kid, "Hey, I'm going to show you how to do a wizard potion," it involves vinegar and baking soda, they're like, "Oh, let me see this." You pour them together, and it foams over, and they're amazed. That's really cool to them. They don't feel cheated. That's cool. Magic and how the world works. There's not this big, thick line like we draw. That's a great opportunity for you to reach out to young people, to realize that if they're reading Harry Potter, they'll want to learn science. Think about the Harry Potter books. They go to classes and alchemy and all these sort of nonsense, but they're going to classes, they're learning a process of knowledge, and it's not just you wave a magic wand, you have to know how these things work. That's how science and engineering work. So that's really cool. Focus on wonder. And then honesty. I speak best about what I know. I speak best to people when I'm honest and about my own failings and when I've been fooled, when I've been deceived. And sometimes we see how people are fooled by this stuff, and we kind of position ourselves a little bit above them. And that can be a dangerous position to be in, because then we end up condescending to people. Then we end up being basically the kind of person you don't want to listen to. You don't want to be a butthead. You want to be somebody that people can relate to. Honesty helps with that. I like to be honest about things I'm curious about. When we get cool photographs from Mars with weird formations, I was talking to Phil about one before, I'd bring it in front of my students and say, there's some research papers about what this might be. We don't know. I'm pretty sure it's not banyan trees or spiders, but even if it's just a neat geological formation, that's awesome. So I share them my own curiosity. So integrity is the next part. And integrity has to deal with, sometimes we give people arguments that are kind of pat, and this happens with like firewalk and other things. So integrity, we've got to be honest in how we talk about these things and how we test these things. There was, about 20 years ago, there was an astrology test that the skeptics group did that was probably not the best test they could have done, and they lost some credibility over that because people would look at that and say, hey, you kind of screwed it up. How can we take your word for these things if you're not even going to do what you say you should do? Simplicity. Make things simple. Simple little messages. I like to do 3- and 4-minute clips that just make one single point. I used to, in the first 30 minutes I talked to students, I'd talk about Bigfoot, UFOs, Loch Ness Monster, astrology, and all that. I'm like, hey, I covered everything. I didn't learn anything. If I focus on one thing, that was more effective. Relevancy. Talk about things that are relevant to people. Talk about things that are relevant to them. If you're talking to young people, talk about things that they'll encounter, they have to do in their lives. If you're talking with different groups, if you're talking to senior citizens groups, great place to talk about alternative medicines and homeopathy and all that sorts of quackery. So 5 simple rules that can help you in that capacity. Understand your audience. Again, it's who needs your message. We're talking to students, talking to an audience like this, so you realize, what can you bring to them? I can't bring any insights into how the world works. I can talk a little about what my experiences are in communicating these ideas. So when you want to go communicate to people and you have something to bring to them, think about your audience, who needs it, how you can reach them. I was able to go into schools. I can talk to my friends. Figure out how much time you can give. If you want to start a club or if you want to get involved in going to community centers. Okay? Figure out how they can apply it. What can you give to people they can apply? I love Shermer's stuff because he gives these really cool examples, these visual puzzles, and then you can start thinking about, like, man, do I really assess myself? Maybe not as accurately as I could. How you can create an impression that lasts. You want people to remember what happens. And sometimes if you keep your message simple, it'll last. Step 5, reaching your audience. Once you know what you want to talk about, once you know how you're going to talk about it and who you're going to talk to, what are the ways you can just go get to an audience? You can stand on a street side, a big question mark. There's a lot of ways now. Internet provides just a tremendous amount of opportunities. Blogging, discussion forums, email, newsletters, what have you. Classrooms, there's community centers, there's print, and there's interpersonal to people. If you have an interest in communicating these things, you pick one and work through there. Every one of you has the opportunity to reach out to more people and talk about these ideas. Talk about what happened here. If you have a small newspaper, a small town, you go back there and you tell them about this conference. Tell them about the speakers. If you have you go to if you work someplace that has a house journal, you can do that. It doesn't have to be just skeptical places you talk about this. It's better when you tell other people about it. People like to know. How many of you told people, okay, I'm going to this skeptics conference, and your friends go, what's that? Okay? And then you're kind of like, well, it's basically we sit around and talk about the fact that UFOs aren't real. No, but we talk about, it's a love of science, love of this process, and tell that to other people. Because we have, look around this room, there are over 550 people here. 550 people here. And we did a minimal amount of promotion. We had some great help with the Skeptic Society. But, Phil thinks maybe this is all the skeptics in the country. He said that facetiously. But there's probably a lot more people who love to come here that they found out. I've talked to professors and mentioned, like, oh, wow, put me on the mailing list. I want to know. Talk about here. Talk about this experience. It's a great way to get other people involved. So, again, define your goal as a critical thinker. Go with what you know. 5 rules for better communication. Figure out how to communicate your message better. Understand your audience, and then find a way to reach your audience. And that's ways in which you can make a difference. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, because otherwise I'm going to turn this over to Phil and go to lunch. Any questions? Sorry, one more thing I want to point out. I forgot to cover this at the very beginning. I'm very excited because of the fact that when I first got involved in this, and I went to my first conferences, I was one of the few young people there. And other than maybe children of people there, and I've watched this change and progress. There are a lot more women involved. There are a lot more young people involved. We have parents bringing their kids. We've had an internship program at the JRF now. We mentioned Jonathan Jacob before. We have a couple other interns over here. We mentioned Evelyn. Way in the back there, at the young man in the suit, is Justin, who was actually the first ever intern at the JRF, Justin Young, who is now editor of a school newspaper up at Syracuse. And he's one of our success stories. And then there was me. Well, I was never really an intern. Also, we have, I don't know if Kelly's here. Kelly Kirkle came and was an intern at the JRF. Michael Feldman. Michael, are you here?